What's going on, everybody? It is Chris Aiken from the Classic Metal Show and Aftershocks TV. And before we get to this next episode, I just wanted to remind you that I have a book out there called And Other Things I Should Not Say. It is about the absolute debauchery that raged in my world when I was stationed overseas in Korea, as well as a little bit of Arizona and some basic training and AIT stories as well. It's kind of my military book. It is wild, friends. I'm going to tell you now, it is definitely not biblical reading. So make sure you go over and get it. It's on Amazon.com or my website, Chris Aiken Books, and Other Things I Should Not Say. Get it now if you're bold enough to dare, all right? All right, here's the episode you actually came to see. It is Aftershocks right here on Aftershocks TV, and joining us today, an absolute legend, a man that's been doing this as long as I've been alive, and I'm old. So, so I have to say I am honored to speak with him. He's from the band 10 Years After. Have not a new release, but a new edition of a release, and he also has a book as well. He's busy as ever. He's drummer Ric Lee of 10 Years After. Rick, how are you?
I'm pretty darn good. How are you, sir?
I am great, man. It is. I have to tell you, Rick. I grew up with. I'm 52 years old. So.
Oh, you're not but a youngster.
Yeah, I'm a child, I guess.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
But I had very rock parents, and you know, my mom especially, she was into every single bit of the music that I think you came up with, whether it was your band or whether it was, you know, even a little bit earlier, Stones, Who, Beatles, you know, Zeppelin, etc. You know, and it's amazing to me, and probably to you as well, the staying power that all of that music has had. It seems like, you know, trends have come and gone, but the music from that era, from the first era, the first true era of rock and roll, has stayed very much alive. And it's a lot. And I think that's in large part to guys like you that have never just given up on it. You know, you keep not only performing, but you keep writing new music, and you keep creating solid music instead of, you know, embarrassing a legacy.
That's very kind of you. I appreciate it. Thank you. If you notice over my, sorry, it's that shoulder, you can see I've got the watermelon from Woodstock. No, I'm kidding.
Very good, man.
That's just a honeydew.
Sure.
Yeah, that's really flattering from what you say. I mean, I remember Mick Jagger saying when they first started up as the Stones, and they started having a couple of hit singles, and they said, how long do you think you'll be doing this? He said, well, I think if we're lucky, it'll be about 3 years. and we all felt like that, you know, you just never knew. I mean, I think I speak for Chick as well. We would never imagine we would still be going in 2021, you know, having started in 1967. So yeah, it's incredible, it really is.
Sure. Now, Rick, being part of you know, I'll say it was the wave of bands after the Beatles, because there was that first, you know, the initial 60s, and then there was, you guys were in part of that next wave. Do you think that by the time you came from the UK to here, that America was more welcoming or less interested than if you had been in the first wave?
Well, difficult to say, because the second wave actually was more of a blues invasion.
Okay.
You know, the blues thing had started off in England. What happened actually, which I think is interesting, the trombone player Chris Barber, his band had a #1 record in UK and America called Petit Fleur, which was on the clarinet, actually played by Monty Sunshine.
Okay.
They came over to America to tour, and Harold Pendleton, who was the owner and the manager of the Marquee Club, where we started in London, they came over together for the tour, and they went to Chicago, and they saw all the blues acts, you know, like Muddy Waters, John Lee Hooker, Big Bill Broonzy, Sonny Boy Williamson. You know, probably, sorry, not Brunsey, Sonny Boy Williamson, because I think Brunsey may have passed on by then. But they, you know, and Chris was just enamored with it all. And he said, we've got to get these guys to England. We've got to bring them to England. So they fixed up tours to the UK for these guys, and they brought them in. And that really was what triggered the UK band's love of the blues. I mean, the Yardbirds were going by that time, you know, with Eric Clapton.
Sure.
John Mayall was starting up his Blues Breakers. Clapton hadn't joined him originally. I can't remember who the original guitarist was, but you know, and then you have, you know, we sort of clung onto the coattails, as it were, you know, and we all played at the Marquee Club. The Marquee was really a founding base for everybody. Oh, I know, I was thinking of Alexis Corner was what I call the grandfather of British blues. Alexis had been into blues for a long time, and he actually had been sort of had his feet in the jazz scene, but he was desperately trying to branch more into the blues side of things. Lonnie Donegan, another guy who had a big hit with Rock Island Line, which was, I'm not sure whether that was a hit in the States, but it was a #1 in England. Okay. And that was what we call skiffle, which was kind of a blend of blues and folk. So that's what was happening in England. And as I say, we kind of clung on to that. I know I was going to say about Alexis as well. When Alexis played at the Marquee Club, he had a residency there, and he found this support band that he rather liked, and they were called the Rolling Stones.
Sure.
They supported Alexis for quite a long time, but then Alexis actually fired them because they were becoming more popular than he was. Right. So the Stones then moved off, I think, to the Crawdaddy Club, which was in South London, and built up their reputation through that, you know. And then a whole load of blues clubs, when we came through, were forming in London. There was a Manor House Blues Club. Most of them were actually rooms in pubs, but you know, we would absolutely fill these places.
Sure.
And then what happened was we got a recording deal with Decca, and they put out the first album, which was released in America, but I don't think many people heard about it. It was a closely guarded secret, as I recall.
Right.
That was on their American arm, which is London Records.
Okay.
But Bill Graham at the Fillmore West heard it, and he wrote to our manager that I have a copy actually, the telegram. And he says, if you're ever in America, you know, as if you would be in those days, please get in touch and let me know what it would cost me to put 10 Years After on at my venue, Fillmore West. I really liked the album. I really liked the sound of the band. So then Chris Wright went crazy trying to find the money to get us over there for the first tour.
Sure.
Well, I think that's roughly how it happened, you know.
Sure. When it was going on, and especially in those club days, you know, and not only your band, but obviously the bands before you as well, did you sort of have a hint that it could turn into international success? I mean, or was it just like, wow, there's all these great clubs here, and we're just happy that we have all these great bands to see here?
Never really anticipated we were going to turn into what we subsequently did. It was really the movie of Woodstock that I think cemented that. But no, we came over and we used to do 3 tours a year of 3 months at a time. And after Woodstock, of course, that became a bit of a trial for everybody. You know, living in a cocoon like that for 9 months of the year, basically, and nipping home for about a month or so, and touring in UK and Europe as well.
Sure.
But in the early days, we used to play 3 days in a place, and we played the clubs. Boston Tea Party was the classic example. We used to play there 3 nights and built our reputation there, and then started to get 1 or 2 in the summertime. There were 1 or 2 festivals. I remember we did Harvard University. We did on I think it was on the you'd call it the American football pitch. We call it soccer pitch. You know, and they used about a half of that. I remember we did it with Mott the Hoople. were on with us. I can't remember who supported who, but anyway, it was a joint effort. And so that we sort of basically were following a similar rule to the one we had in England, you know, playing the clubs, and then gradually branching out to the festivals and things like that. As we did in England, we got our record deal actually with Decca because we played at the Windsor Blues and Jazz Festival, and Mike Vernon saw us there and told Decca that he wanted to sign us to Decca.
Okay.
He was our producer for the first 3 albums. And bizarrely, we just about, I think it was probably 2 months or something. I can't remember. It's in the book anyway, the actual time. We'd done an audition for Decca and been turned down. We also, in those days, you could do an audition for BBC Radio as well. And we'd been turned down for that. So no idea where we were going at all until we did the Windsor Blues and Jazz Festival. Sure. And we got a standing ovation there. We played in the afternoon and the crowd went crazy. And then Mike Vernon said he wanted to sign us. So that set us on the right way of making albums and stuff.
Sure, definitely. Now, Rick, you obviously played Woodstock, which is, you know, probably still the biggest, maybe not in attendance, but it's certainly the biggest concert moment in pretty much rock history. I think people still hold it to that iconic level. For you as a performer, was it truly about the music that was created, or was it about the whole ambiance and or was it a perfect storm of the music meeting the ambiance and the political climate and everything else that went into making it?
I always say that Woodstock did what it said on the tin. It was a festival of love, peace, and music.
Okay.
You know, not necessarily in that order, but a combination of those things. And if you look at it and look back on it, you can see, I think there was very little, or if no violence whatsoever.
Right.
With those 300,000 people, or however many it was. I mean, some people say 500,000. I've no idea. When we were there, I didn't bother counting them. I just knew it was a lot of people when we flew in the helicopter. You know, there was this enormous crowd. So, and they lived together for more than 3 days, you know, because they got there several days earlier. And I think it probably took them a couple of days to get the hell out of there, you know, and they lived there under really quite difficult conditions, you know, with the storm came up and they were living in mud for hours, well, probably a day or more, you know, soaked to the skin. A lot of them couldn't get out to get any food. There were no concession stores as such. Okay. I know Wavy Gravy later brought in the people who provided like a canteen, you know, fed the people because they weren't getting fed. Helicopters were dropping food parcels from out of the sky. People were catching them, and if the person next to them didn't have anything, they were ripping whatever it was in half, like it was a sandwich or whatever, and giving it to their neighbor, you know, which is really how we should live. And in a funny sort of way, COVID is teaching us some of that, you know. Whether it'll stay that way afterwards, who knows? Because as we know, the Woodstock, the spirit is still there, I think, as you rightly said, but it did wane fairly quickly after the festival itself. And it was, don't forget, America was still in a war with Vietnam,
right?
You know, or a war in Vietnam, I should say. And you know, it wasn't until Richard Nixon came along that you managed to get out of that, you know.
Right.
So, you know, the rest of the world wasn't all peace and love.
Right. Definitely not.
And I think Woodstock stands there as a beacon, and it's something that we should look at certainly time to time to reflect on that, you know.
And I, you know, as a music fan, I've always thought the reason they haven't been able to recreate it, I know they've had festivals that have, you know, been huge, and certainly they've packaged some festivals and called them Woodstock, you know, Woodstock 94 and 99, whatever. But I've always thought that the biggest difference between the original and everything else that came behind it was the original wasn't based on commerce. The original was based on attitude and love of the music and you know, like you said, peace and love in general. Everything that came behind it was based on making money. And I think that's been the biggest reason they haven't been able to recreate that that ambiance again.
Well, I think Leo Lyons always said, you know, that after Woodstock, that's when the word business, you know, the music business,
Right.
the accent was on business, because people realised, although that was a free festival, and I think the original the original idea was to make profits, you know, but the kids were breaking the fences down and demanded to have a free festival. And I think Michael Lang and Artie Kornfeld were very smart in letting them do that, you know, because if you look at the Isle of Wight festival the following year, which we played, that wasn't a very nice affair at all. When the kids started breaking down the fences, demanding a free festival, and one of the kids stood on stage and at the microphone, they let him have the microphone. But after that, when they started breaking stuff down, they set dogs on them and were beating them with nightsticks. You know? So it was a nasty flavour. It wasn't what Woodstock was at all.
Sure.
You know, and as Leo rightly said, the business moved in, and people saw that they could make a lot, if they could get enough people there and do it right, they could make a lot of money.
Definitely. You know, and since we're talking about Woodstock, Rick, let's talk about your book, From Headstocks to Woodstock, because it's a very, for me, who was not there, obviously I was one, I think, when Woodstock happened, but
really? That's amazing.
You know, it's crazy.
I was 24.
Okay, so even then you were a young man there seeing something nobody else would see, and certainly it's great to read what you know, not only about Woodstock but everything that you've kind of chronicled from the eyes of somebody that was there and not from a historical perspective. Because as you can imagine, somebody my age, you know, when I see Woodstock, I see the videos, you know, all I see is the same videos that everybody is seeing. You know, but you were there, you were backstage, you were, you know, running into various guys that people look at now as, like, you know, myths, you know, the Hendrixes of the world and the Janis Joplins of the world. You know, so talk about your decision to write this book, and, you know, and how cathartic it was for you to share so many of these experiences.
Well, it was something I wanted to do. The trouble was, just nipping back to when I was at primary school, I think that's what you call pre-grade.
Right. Sure. Elementary school here,
pretty young. And we used to listen to stuff on the radio. We had radio education, which, strangely enough, they brought back right now here in England for the COVID, for teaching the kids at home. And we used to hear all these amazing sort of fantasy things on. And we heard, actually, that's where I came across Lord of the Rings the first time.
Okay.
Because they serialized it and put it on radio. And we were then asked to write a story. And I think it was about the Sorcerer's Apprentice. You know, Disney did the Mickey Mouse movie of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with the guy can't stop the buckets of water.
Right.
And the whole place floods. And we had to sort of write our version of that. And I did, and I got really good marks for it, but it was never finished. It wasn't complete. So I had that bad reputation with myself of, like, if I start this, will I finish it?
Sure.
But I got about halfway through. It took me about 5 years to do the first bit. And then I'd stopped, and I was talking to a friend of mine in California, Jan Jones, her name is. She's an agent she's a big fan of the band for many years. And she was an agent for after dinner speakers and for college lecturers who do lecture tours and so on. And she said, do you have a talk? I said, yes, I do, actually. I do a one-man show called From Headstocks to Woodstock. And I had various versions of it on video for promotion.
Sure.
So I sent it over to her. She said, oh, this is really good. She said, I'd love to help you out with this. Do you have a book? Because that's always a good starting point. I said, well, I got a half of one. So she said, well, finish it, you know, and then we can get started. So 5 years later, I finished it. It took me about 10 years. But yeah, I love writing it, and I actually edited the whole thing about, well, the way I do it is I write set a target of 1,000 words a day.
Okay.
I write 1,000 words, and then when I start the next day, before I write the next 1,000, I edit the first 1,000.
Okay.
Then I write the next 1,000. Then on day 3, I'm editing 2,000, and so on. And obviously, as you get further along, it gets longer to edit.
Sure.
But I did actually, when the thing was finished, we had somebody proofread it, and it came back and they said, "Oh yeah, we think it's really good as that." And I went through it, and there was very little proofreading done at all. So we, but I was told that the person who read it had enjoyed it, which was a step in the right direction.
Sure.
So then there was a young lady in the office, Sophie, who was looking after the production of the book and everything, and she proofread it, and she came back with a whole list of stuff, and then I went through it again myself, and proofread it and altered what she suggested, and then found more stuff that I thought needed sorting out. And so it's that constant process. I think anybody who writes, it has to be a good editor. Now, a lot of people, I didn't have any money with this. I was self-published.
Okay.
But if you're signed to a publishing house, they have in-house editors
Sure.
who do the job for you, you know. But I thoroughly enjoyed the whole process, and I was very lucky as well. I had my own diaries.
Okay.
But bizarrely, the diary for 1969 finishes about a month before Woodstock. There's nothing written.
Oh, wow.
But my memories are good on that respect, thank God.
Sure.
Also, a very dear friend, Herb Starr, who sadly died a couple of years after I met him. He was a big fan of ours in Boston. And he was actually at Woodstock. There's a photograph of him that I've got where he's actually leaning on the stage at the front of the whole thing. And because the stage wasn't very high at Woodstock, you know, it was just above waist height for the audience, I mean. Herb put together a book called Alvin Lee and 10 Years After, A Pictorial History.
Okay.
And he had, it's virtually chronological order, both up to, well, the foundation of the band before 10 Years After, when it was the Jaybirds with Alvin Lee and Leo. And then when Chick Churchill joined in 1966, but he didn't get to play with us really until 67.
Right.
And then Herb's book goes on past Woodstock.
Okay.
Right up until about, I think, 1975 when the band split up.
Sure.
You know, the first time, that is. And so I used that. That was the skeleton for me. And then when I came across an event, I thought, oh yeah, and I could add my story and put the flesh on it.
Sure.
So that's how it was put together. So I was very lucky in having that as a skeleton.
Definitely. You know, it's interesting, Rick. I'm a writer as well. I've written 6 books. So, you know,
you're just showing off now.
Well, no, I'm not, because I'll tell you what, I would have written none if I followed your philosophy of going back and rereading it. You know, it's interesting hearing from people the different process, because I know for me, even now, I can open my book up, any of my books up to pretty much any page and find stuff that I don't like, or I don't feel is fleshed out enough or whatnot. It's very interesting that you went immediately back once you'd written it and fleshed it out then. That's you know, for me personally, that it's very hard to get past the original thought. You know, a lot of times I read words that are misspelled wrong just because I don't think of it, you know.
Yeah, well, I had all of that, and I've just been sent. We're doing some social media stuff with the new album. I'll talk a bit more about the album in a minute, if I may.
Sure, absolutely.
But Marcus has just done a video. Marcus Bonfanti, our lead guitarist and singer now.
Sure.
And he's just taken the first track off the album, which is called Land of the Vandals.
Okay.
Excuse me. And he's written, and he's taken 30 seconds of it, or thereabouts. And he's taken the guitar parts off.
Okay.
And then in the video, he shows people what the guitar parts are. And then we're inviting other guitarists to play along with me, Chick, and Colin Hodgkinson, the bass player.
Great.
So that's and we're having a contest to find out who the best is. And when we find the best, then they can win a prize to chat with us or whatever it is. Anyway, the point of the story was I just had the press release through from Deco Entertainment, who are the people who are putting the album out. The album's called A Sting in the Tail Deluxe Edition. I'll explain that in a minute.
Okay.
And he sent me the press release, and straight away I'm on there with the crossing out. You know, I'm doing it on computer, crossing it out, marking it in red, all the changes that I think need doing to it. There weren't many on this, but you know, I just like things to be good when they're press releases. You know, well, anything. I find myself editing all sorts of stuff when I, you know.
Same here.
Maybe that's my future living.
Could very well be. You never know. But I think you still got a lot of life left, though, musically, Rick. Because listening to the deluxe edition of A Sting in the Tail, it's very clear to me that the classic energy of the band is very much still there. You know, I mean, obviously there's some new players that are playing with you and Chick, but at the same time, you can listen to so many of the songs and they have that classic flavor. I'll point to like Up in Smoke as an example.
Yes.
Very classic 10 years after vibe to it. For you, you know, I mean, you've obviously been doing this your whole life. How difficult is it to keep that core flavor of the band when you've moved on to new players, you know, to play with you?
Well, I think one of the things that helped with that, well, there were two aspects really. First of all, we recorded it as a studio album, and Marcus was the hub. And so I went down to London to his little studio there in Cricklewood Green, and we wrote some songs together. Then Colin went and they wrote songs together, and then Chick went and they wrote songs together. When we got them roughly, you know, into a demo form to give to each other, we sent them all around, and we decided which ones we really wanted to do, because we had about 15 songs, which is unusual for TYA. We're usually struggling to find 10 or 12.
Right.
But anyway, we had 15 thereabouts. So we then went into rehearsal. We picked well, I think we ended up with 12 songs, the 12 that we wanted to do. And then we shaped them, we honed them, we edited them, you know, and generally polished everything to the standard that we wanted. We also wanted to make a radio-friendly album. So the longest track on there is the one you mentioned, Up in Smoke. That's 6 minutes long.
Right.
Everything else is under 5, I think. That's just as a comparison. When we first did I Can't Keep From Crying Sometimes, on the very first 10 Years After album in 1967, it was 4 minutes long.
Right.
If you look at albums later, live albums and stuff, it was 15 minutes long. And I think the longest it ended up was 19.
Right.
Because we were jamming and Alvin was throwing in new bits here and there, and we were latching onto it and jamming with it and so on. But that's the way it was, in the early days with us. So we wanted to make a radio-friendly album, and that's really what we tried to do. And we're very proud of this particular album. We love it. So what they've done to make it, and we put it out in Europe about 2 years, nearly 3 years ago, and it did really well. And then Deco Entertainment, I was introduced to them through a very good friend of mine, a DJ in Philadelphia, T. Morgan.
Okay.
And T said, we got to get that album out in America properly. You know, he said it's only available on import and occasional distributor copies. You know, you really need to get it out. It's such a good album. I said, well, thank you. And so he said, look, I've got some people you can talk to. So he introduced me to Deco, and we've got on famously. And they said, could they have, they knew we'd done an album called Naturally Live, which was a subsequent album to Sting in the Tail.
Right.
And so they said, could I have that 4 live tracks from that album? So we've given them 4, one of which was I'd Love to Change the World, which of course was 10 years big hit in the 70s. Sure. And just in passing, that album that came from, A Space in Time, it's the 50th anniversary of that album in October this year.
Right.
And, what goes around comes around, you know. So that's basically how it was put together, and it was a real joy for Chick and me to write in that way, because we've never had it like a collaborative effort in that respect. You
Sure.
know, Alvin had always written the stuff. We'd written 1 or 2 tracks each, but nothing serious. And
Sure.
you mentioned Up in Smoke. Sorry, I'm nearly done.
Go ahead.
Mentioned Up in Smoke. That on virtually every album that we did, studio album, Alvin would do acoustic or semi-acoustic track. On the first album, it's Don't Want You Woman, which is very much a Brunsy style.
Mm-hmm.
And a little story with that, if I may. Alvin's parents were very much into the blues. And when Chris Barber brought these black blues players over from America, one of the stops on the tour was Nottingham, which is where Alvin was born and lived. And they played at a place called the Dancing Slipper, which ironically was where I did my audition for the Jaybirds with Alvin and Leo and got the job. But they went to see Brunsy one night, Alvin's parents, and they invited him back for a drink at their house, and he agreed. He said, yeah. And Alvin was supposed to be in bed asleep, but of course, when he heard them come in, he got up, and they let him stay up to meet the great man. And he sat there and played his guitar, drank his whiskey, and I guess showed Alvin a few licks, and I think that was it. It was all over then. Alvin was on the road to the blues, you know.
Well,
yeah,
and certainly brought it for decades. For you personally, I mean, obviously with Alvin's passing, which is amazingly almost 10 years now at this point.
Yeah, 2013. Yeah,
so it's almost 10 years.
I know.
Do you think he ever got the, I don't want to say acclaim, because that's not quite right, but that he ever got the I guess acclaim is right. Do you think he ever got the acclaim that he should have gotten, as a singer, as a guitarist, and most importantly as a songwriter? Because I always thought that was kind of the strength of 10 Years After, was the songwriting, maybe even more than the music itself. The songs were masterful, and I always thought they were masterful in a way that other bands could have played them, and they could have had as much success as when you guys put them together, yourselves.
Well, on that one, I mean, I think the acclaim he got was distorted. It was all centered around the press saying Captain Speedfingers,
Right.
and he was a lot more than that, a lot more than that. I mean, I learned a lot of sort of jazz stuff from him and blues stuff, really, from him and what he played, He and Leo actually were a very good nurturing force for me, because I'd come out of like a pop covers band, and they taught me a lot. I mean, I'd never heard of Ray Charles until I met them.
Oh wow!
I certainly hadn't heard of John Lee Hooker or Brunsy or Muddy Waters. I hadn't really. I'd heard of Chuck Berry, but I'd never played anything. And Alvin was a big Chuck Berry fan, so we used to do a lot of Chuck Berry stuff. Bo Diddley I didn't know, but I had to learn the Bo Diddley rhythm pretty darn quick, because Alvin did a 10-minute solo over that in the early days. Yeah. Help Me Baby we did in those days, Sonny Boy Williamson track, which became a big favorite with the TYA audiences.
Sure.
To be honest, with his songwriting, I personally didn't think that was as strong as his guitar playing.
Okay.
And you say other bands could do it. Slade actually did cover Hear Me Calling.
Sure.
The English band Slade.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, there may be other covers that I don't know about. I mean, I personally think his songwriting really started with a Space in Time album, to be honest. Yeah. I thought that he was really starting to be a rounded writer at that point. So that was like what was that? That was the 7th album.
Wow.
And in a way, I think that shows, because you have I'd Love to Change the World on there, and that was our biggest album to date.
Sure.
So, don't get me wrong. I'm not putting him down.
Sure.
I'm still making a very good living out of the heritage and Chick is as well. And we decided we wanted to continue that heritage. We still play Love Like a Man. We still play. I've forgotten the name of it now. I'm Coming On. We did for a while. We changed the set quite a lot nowadays.
Sure.
and we do three of Alvin's numbers as a semi-acoustic spot in the middle of the set. We do Portable People, would you believe, the first single, which disappeared beyond belief. Don't Want You Woman we do, which I love. And we do Losing the Dogs.
Okay.
Which he co-wrote with Gus Dudgeon, of course, the engineer that was on the first three albums.
Wow, definitely. Now, Rick, obviously, you know, COVID has hit everybody, yourselves as well. It looks like maybe potentially it's gonna let loose here, you know, maybe the fall. I'm guessing, like everybody else.
I think you're going to be very lucky. I mean, I hope it happens. I spoke to our American agent. I spoke to our European agent. They both said 2022.
Okay. Well, even with that, I'm assuming that the reason you're speaking to your agent is that you guys are itching to get back out there again.
Oh yeah,
play.
Yeah. Well, it's bizarre. We've got a lot happening. We've got Sting in the Tail Deluxe Edition coming out on the 19th of March. I think in June or July, Chrysalis have finally got the rights to the 6 or 7 tracks we did at Woodstock.
Okay.
And I've heard that, and it sounds really good. I'm very impressed with it, actually. Both the playing of the band and the sound on it that they managed to do for the remastering. And that should be out June or July. And I think the American company are putting it out on red vinyl.
Oh, wow.
Special red vinyl. And then, as I said earlier, we've got Space in Time 50th anniversary. I think they're planning some kind of re-release with that in October. So this year is a busy year for us, except we can't play to anybody.
Right.
You know. So but we're going to be doing. I think we'll do a few live streams with Deco. We're talking about how to put that together. If we can get into Europe, and it's a big if.
Sure.
But if we can, what we want to do is we want to go. There's a theatre in a place called Ulm in Germany, where our sound man lives actually.
Okay.
And we want to go there probably with a reduced audience, maybe do 2 shows. Well, it'll be 1 show cut in half. Okay. 2 hours. So cut it down to 2 one-hour shows with an interval, socially distanced. And then we want to video the whole thing. So we've got stuff for live streams and for future promotion of tracks from a Sting in the Tail, you know. So that's really, that would be a priority if we can get in there, if we're allowed to go in to do just like the 1 gig.
Right.
I think touring could be difficult.
Sure.
Because, it's not just us and the, you know, the social distancing and stuff. It's whether the promoters and us can make money to stay alive long enough to do the tour, you know, because obviously the box office receipts will be reduced.
Right.
You know, and everybody's got to try and cover the cost of the tour.
Right, definitely. Well, I'll tell you this, Rick. For a band that has over 50 years of history, you're not supposed to be this busy, my friend.
Tell me about it. Our PR man, Chip Ruggieri,
right,
is running me ragged with his interviews. I've got another 2 tonight.
Oh, wow.
And I think I've got 4 tomorrow. You know, every day. I mean, I can't complain, you know. Everybody's been very, very complimentary about the album and the book. Absolutely. So I have no complaints whatsoever. And people are buying the book, which is even better. You know? So, yeah.
Absolutely.
One of these days, I figure I might get in the black with it, you know.
There you go.
We'll see how we go.
Certainly. Well, I'll tell you what, Rick, why don't you tell people where they should go online to keep up with you and the band and get Sting in the Tail and all that stuff?
Right. Well, the official 10 Years After website is 10-years-after.co.uk.
Okay.
That's CO. To get the book, if you want a dedication, you can get it on Amazon. But if you want a dedication in it, then you need to go to either the 10 Years After website, and there's a flyer on there for the book, and you fill in the details, excuse me, and it redirects you to the website I'm going to tell you now, which is ricleetya.com. And that's Rick, I'm going to spell it, it's R-I-C, no K, RICLEETYA.com.
Okay.
And that's where, if you go there and put on the order form that you'd like a dedication, if you want something special, put it in there, and I'll do that, and that's what you'll receive when you purchase the book.
Excellent. Well, one more time, Rick, the name of the album is A Sting in the Tail, the deluxe edition. And of course, the book From Headstocks to Woodstock. It's fantastic. It's Ric Lee. It's 10 years after. And Rick, thanks so much for coming on to Aftershocks.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you, Chris. Yeah.
Thanks for listening to Aftershocks. For more episodes, go to our website at www.aftershockspodcast.com. Visit us on our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages for more news and information on the podcast. And be sure to subscribe, listen to, and review all episodes on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all other podcast platforms. For your music listening pleasure, visit our website or go to www.shockwavesradio.com. For all comments and questions, please email us at info@aftershockspodcast.com.
All right, everybody, another great interview right here on Aftershocks TV. And before we go, just want to remind you one more time, make sure you get over and subscribe to the CMS Podcast Network, cmspn.com. You can watch, you can listen, you can subscribe to everything that we do, not only us, but the classic metal shows, Shockwave Skull Sessions, Talk to Me. It's all there, one site, get 4 great shows, never have to do anything again but be entertained. So check it out, cmspn.com, cmspn.com, cmspn.com. Until next time, folks.